Greetings, and welcome to my new YouTube channel, Eye of the Beholder. I started playing Dungeons & Dragons over 40 years ago. Yes, my friends and I were just like those 70 kids on Stranger Things, except that we played on my family's dining room table, not the basement, and the only supernatural event that ever happened to us is when a girl joined our group for about a month. I've played on and off through high school, college, multiple jobs, and loves found, lost, and found again. In the beginning, everything was on graph paper, and we would mark out positions on the table using coins, buttons, or dice. We eventually graduated to a few lead figurines for player characters, but they were hard to find and expensive, so we had a very limited collection. So, I was thrilled when, in 2003, I was at a gaming convention in Orange County, California, and at the Wizards of the Coast booth, saw a new game featuring miniatures from D&D. Needless to say, I bought a couple starter boxes along with a couple Harbinger boxes. My group and I played the D&D miniature game for a few months, from Harbinger to Dragon Eye to Archfiends. It was interesting but a bit wonky, so we eventually went back to classic D&D. However, as a dungeon master of many years, I immediately saw how amazing these new minis would be for our campaign. I wasn't the only one, as Wizards phased out the miniature game in 2010 and sold licensing to WizKids a couple years later to make minis for classic D&D, starting with Tyranny of Dragons in 2014. I have been faithfully collecting these miniatures the entire time, and now have complete sets of everything from Harbinger to Seas and Shores, with the exception of Spelljammer, Adventures in Space. Sorry, I don't do D&D in space, no space elves, no hippos with ray guns. So, after 20 years of collecting, I thought it would be fun to share my collection. But I didn't want to do full set reviews. Frankly, there are a lot of those out there already, and we really don't need another one. So, I thought I would review by type and creature, showing how they've changed over 20 years. I will be rating each mini by my highly subjective 4P standard: paint, poise, playability, and pizzazz. No need to explain, you'll figure it out as we go. Finally, and needless to say, these ratings are completely subjective and based on my own likes and dislikes. Your mileage may vary. Because, after all, beauty, and minis, are in the eye of the beholder. Anyway, enough chit-chat, on with the show. We'll be starting with Aberrations. Aboleths made their first appearance in 1983 in TSR's Monster Manual 2. Initially described as amphibious creatures with high intelligence, long life, and a hatred of all land-based creatures, they evolved to virtually immortal and extremely powerful beings, with memories that go back eons, and eventually, a lamprey-like mouth to go along with its 4 deadly tentacles. We get our first Aboleth in May of 2009 from the Monster Manual Dangerous Delve set. Usually I'm partial to the WizKids minis over the Wizards, but this is the exception. Big fan of the paint job on this one. Of the 3, it's the only one whose colors match the standard description: sea green on top with an orange underbelly. The eyes could stand out more, but that's a minor quibble. The pose is also quite striking, conveying motion and aggression. Playability is high, as I can imagine using this mini as a surprise attack as it springs out of the water at its prey. Finally, it just looks cool, and cool equals pizzazz. So my score on this mini is paint 22, pose 25, playability 25, pizzazz 23, for a total score of 95. We have to wait another 11 years before we get our next Aboleth from the Fangs and Talons set of November of 2020. Right off the bat, the paint is completely wrong. Grayish green with some darker green highlights on its spine and tail, plus a bit of red around its mouth. The pose is also a bit passive, with its tentacles trailing behind it like it's out for a leisurely swim. I do like that WizKids made the base resemble water though. You'll see the difference in the next mini. Playability is also limited, If my players are in an underwater setting, I might use this mini over the Wizards mini, but otherwise it stays in the drawer. Final rating, Paint 7, Pose 15, Playability 10, Pizzazz 5, for a total score of 37. 3 years later, we get our final Aboleth from the Seas and Shores in October of 2023. I like this one better than the last, but not as much as the first. The coloring is better, although the orange coloring should have covered the entire underbelly rather than just the tail and tentacles. The mouth is similar to the previous mini, although not quite as detailed. The pose is pretty good, with his tentacles spread wide and coiled as if about to strike. The body is also somewhat coiled on itself, particularly the tail, adding to the appearance of an impending strike. Final rating, Paint 13, Pose 20, Playability 20, Pizzazz 17, for a final score of 60. Here's a little bonus. I present the Scum. Also from Seas and Shores, Aboleths are slavers, with the ability to secrete a viscous gray fluid that transforms any air breathers caught into it into, well, scum. Basically, mindless automatons who obey the commands of their master without hesitation. The paint job on the mini is fairly basic, a monocolor blue-gray with a dark wash for depth. The pose is pretty good, leaning forward to attack with its trident pitched slightly upwards. If you do end up running an Aboleth encounter, you'll want a few of these, so that definitely ups the playability factor of the mini. And having a half dozen or so of these on the minis surrounding the big bad Aboleth would make for a challenging battle for any party, which is cool. So final rating, Paint 12, Pose 15, Playability 23, Pizzazz 18, for a total rating of 68. Our next aberration on the list is the mighty Bolhanoth, a creature from the Shadowfell. As near as I can tell, its first appearance was in the WOTC miniature game, as I haven't been able to find it referenced in any of the various books. It's basically an ambush predator, with the ability to telepathically read other creatures' minds, determining what they desire, and planting the notion that said desire is nearby, bringing the Bolhanoth's victim right to its doorstep. The Bolhanoth's one and only appearance in miniature form is from 2008's Dungeons of Dread. I quite like this mini. The paint job is simple but effective, with a bluish body with lighter colored spines along its back and sides, and darker tips on the tentacles. The pose also matches that of an ambush predator, crouched slightly backward as if to spring forward, tentacles in attack position and mouth agape. Playability may be difficult just based on its rarity. You'll need to find one online that includes the stat card from the WTC game to get its stat block, then modify them to match whatever version of D&D you're playing. However, what a wonderful surprise to spring on your party, especially that one guy who ruins your ominous descriptions of unknown creatures by reciting their names and stat blocks before you get halfway through. Final rating, Paint 20, Pose 20, Playability 6, Pizzazz 20, for a total rating of 66. Our next set of beasties are probably my favorite and the namesake of the channel. Look, I know the game is called Dungeons & Dragons, but to me the most iconic monster in D&D is the Beholder, also known as the Sphere of Many Eyes, Eye Tyrant, or Oh Shit, Run Away. These guys have been around since the OG Monster Manual, and they are just frankly badass. While the bite they can deliver is nasty, everyone knows that their main weapon are the eyes. With a central eye casting an anti-magic ray to the front, and its eye stalks causing effects from charm to disintegration, even a single Beholder is more than enough for even the most experienced party to handle. Despite its iconic stature, we did not get our first Beholder from Wizards until 6 sets in one of the best early sets in the Death Knell set from March of 2005. As an initial offering, it's pretty good. Coloring is correct, and there is some decent detail on the central eye and mouth. Pose is good, as floating heads go, with the eye stalks all basically pointed forward as if its attention is locked on a foolish party invading its lair. Playability is solid, and since it's a Beholder, it's automatically cool. So my final rating on this mini is Paint 15, Pose 15, Playability 15, Pizzazz 20, for a total score of 65. 3 years later, we get a Beholder variant from the Dungeons of Dread set in March of 2008. The Eye of Flame makes its first appearance in the 4th edition Monster Manual and is described as slightly more docile than your standard Beholder, willing to work with more powerful Beholders. Don't think this makes them pushovers. Instead of an anti-magic cone, the central eye generates a cone that renders targets vulnerable to fire, and you can guess what type of damage one of its eye stalks do. The mini itself is, as its predecessor, decent. Coloring and pose are as expected, while playability may be limited due to its rarity. Final rating, Paint 15, Pose 15, Playability 12, Pizzazz 15, for a total score of 57. A year later, we get the Beholder Eye Tyrant from the Monster Manual Dangerous Delve set. I gotta say, what an absolute pain this mini has been. I don't know if I got a defective mini out of the box, or if they are all like this, but I've done everything to straighten this one out. The standard soak in hot water, then immerse in ice water did not do the trick. The result you see here is doing the hot-cold soak, followed by putting weights on the base to flatten it out for about 5 days, all to no avail. Base is still warped, causing the Beholder to lean backwards. Basically unplayable. Fortunately, I have lots of other Beholders to choose from. Rating, Paint 15, Pose 15, Playability 0, Pizzazz 8, well, because it's still a Beholder after all, for a total of 38. 3 months later, in August of 2009, we got the Beholder Ultimate Tyrant in the Monster Manual Legendary Evils set. Also known as a Hive Mother, as far as I can tell, it has only appeared in the Spelljammer adventures. It is made from hard plastic versus the more rubberized plastic of most minis. Its purple coloring, white horns and teeth, and yellow eye makes for a striking appearance. The pose, looking slightly downward that gives the appearance of bearing down on its prey, makes this mini a winner. As with the Balhanoth, playability due to rarity may be difficult, but I can tell you from practical experience that it's worth it. I modified the stats from the stat card and sprung this bad boy on a party once. Epic battle, almost a TPK. It was an encounter that was discussed amongst the players for months after. Paint 25, Pose 25, Playability 4, Pizzazz 25, for a total score of 79. WizKids released their first Beholder in September of 2015 in the Rage of Demons set and hit it out of the park on their first attempt. Good lord, this Beholder is perfect. Paint is spot on, with the central eye a standout. With the eye stalks in an obvious state of agitation and the mouth agape, it's just awesome. It's probably a bit too big, and I do wish the rod connecting the base to the mini was more stable, but I'm willing to overlook that. Let's just take a moment and bask in its glory. You know, there's no need for a breakdown. This Beholder is a 100. In the same set, WizKids also gives us a shadow version of this mini. Shadow creatures are creatures either born in the Shadowfell, or like this guy, creatures who spend too much time there and take on the plane's characteristics. This mini is made from translucent plastic to simulate its shadowy existence, otherwise it's a carbon copy of its predecessor. Playability is also limited. Unless your PC spent a lot of time in the Shadowfell, you're not going to get much use from this guy. Paint, well, such as it is, 12. Pose 25. Playability 7. Pizzazz 20. For a total score of 64. We get our next Beholder mini in January of 2017 in the Monster Menagerie 2 set. And right off the bat, you'll notice the color scheme is radically different from other Beholders. However, this is creature accurate, as beholders from the Faroon are known for their colorful hides. This guy certainly lives up to it, with blue eye stalks and upper body fading to a yellowish hue on the underbelly. This beholder is a bit smaller than others, which is also normal for Faroon, but no less menacing, with an evil expression and eye stalks watching in all directions. Playability is therefore solid, and its beholder cool, so paint 20, pose 16, playability 17, pizzazz 21, for a total score of 74. In September of 2018, we get our next beholder from the Waterdeep Dragon Heist set. This beholder is unique in that he is a named NPC. Meet Xanathar, crime lord of Waterdeep. He has the same blue-yellow coloring as his predecessor, with slightly more details plus a more interesting visage. And look at the transition between the blue and yellow on the face of Xanathar, and tell me that doesn't look like the hairline from a mafioso right out of The Godfather. When he speaks, I'm certain he sounds like Al Pacino. Paint 22, pose 18, playability 17, pizzazz 24, for a total score of 81. We get our final Beholder mini 5 years later in 2022's Spelljammer Adventures in Space. And yes, I did say that I didn't try to collect this set because D&D in space is stupid, but I did pick up select minis that had made appearances in standard D&D, and in the case of this mini, I'm glad I did. He is almost as awesome as the Beholder we got in Rage of Demons, just slightly smaller. And from a playability perspective, smaller is actually better, as it is more in line with the correct size for this creature. Everything else about this mini, coloring, visage, vitality, chef's kiss. Screw it, this Beholder is a 100 as well. There are several variants to the standard Beholder, known collectively as Beholder kin. While they share some common elements, such as a single eye, the ability to fly or levitate, and a generally nasty disposition, they are wildly different in appearances and abilities. Here's a look at the various Beholder kin miniatures available. The Death Kiss made its one and only appearance in the Volos and Mordenkainen's Foes set of 2019. With no mouth and tentacles instead of eye stalks, the Death Kiss draws sustenance from blood. Each tentacle ends in a sucker-like mouth, which can shoot up to 20 feet to surprise and capture prey, which it then feeds upon. The mini is a pretty good representation of the creature. Its grayish colors and red-tipped tentacles are accurate. The pose gives the impression of movement, as if the Death Kiss is closing in on its prey, tentacles extended. Actually, it's pretty cool overall. Rating, Pain 18, Pose 20, Playability 15, Pizzazz 20, for a total score of 73. Sometimes, when a beholder obsesses over a dragon rival long enough, the obsession pervades its dreams to the point that an eye drake is created. Making its one and only appearance in 2022's Fizbane's Treasury of Dragons, it is an unholy combination of beholder and dragon. It has attributes of both creatures, the anti-magic central eye and powered eye stalks of the beholder, plus the dragon's desire for a hoard and its willingness to defend it to the death. I'm not sure how much playability you'll get out of this mini, but it is very cool. Its body has the shape and color of a potato, with the yellow eyes, dark horns, and a gaping mouth holding the central eye, while the pose captures it in mid-flight. Rating, Paint 16, Pose 19, Playability 9, Pizzazz 24, for a total of 68. The Goth, also known as a Night Eye, is a beholder kin that can feed on magic as well as flesh. Not as xenophobic as a beholder, they have been known to form clusters for protection and profit. We got our first Goth way back in 2004 in the Archfiend set, and frankly, it's not a very good interpretation, as it lacks the lower feeding tentacles as well as the smaller eye surrounding the central eye. Coloring and pose are nice, not thrilling, but nice. Rating: paint 12, pose 6, playability 12, pizzazz 10, for a total score of 40. We had to wait 18 years to get a decent goth, and we did in 2022's Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse set. Now this is what a goth should look like. Feeding tentacles, check. Small eyes surrounding central eye, barely visible, but check. Paint, pose, playability, check, check, and check. Seriously, if you're going to use a goth in your campaign, you need to go with this one. Rating: paint 23, pose 20, playability 25, pizzazz 24, for a score of 92. Gazers are tiny, unintelligent beholderkin who, a little more than aggressive pets, utterly devoted to their masters. They are dreamed into existence by beholders and used by them as sentries, spies, or familiars for beholder mages or magic users serving a beholder. We get our one and only Gazer Mini in the Monster Menagerie 3 set of March of 2018. Fortunately, these are common minis, as you'll want a lot of them if you are planning on running a beholder lair encounter. Considering the tiny size of the mini, WizKids did a pretty good job on it. You can make out the central eye stalks, and mouth on it, and the swirling nature of the clear stand gives the impression of a bobbing, weaving target. Score: paint 13, pose 20, playability 20, pizzazz 10, for a total score of 63. Spectators made their first appearance in AD&D's Monster Manual 2 way back in 1983. Spectators are one of the few beholderkin that are not evil. They are basically peaceful if the party isn't trying to take something they're guarding. They can be conversed with and, if the price is right, entered into agreements to stand guard over treasure. We get our first spectator in 2015's Rage of Demons. Good, solid mini. I like the extended tongue, but don't know why it's blue. It should be pink. It's also not very stable on its thin base. I suppose I could glue it down, but I don't like doing that with my minis. Score: paint 12, pose 14, playability 10, pizzazz 14, for a perfectly average score of 50. Our second spectator came in the final set of 2023, Seas and Shores. I like this one much better. Color is a bit lighter, allowing for its rough, lumpy hide to stand out, and the tongue is the right color. I also like the pose better, as the eye stalks seem longer and more animated. All in all, while the first one was perfectly fine, if I need a spectator for a dungeon encounter, this is the one I'm pulling out. Score: paint 18, pose 20, playability 20, pizzazz 19, for a total score of 77. The Burbalangs are evil aberrations from the astral plane that occasionally visit the prime material plane to feed. With leathery black skin and wings, glowing white eyes, and a demon-like visage, Burbalangs first appeared in Advanced D&D in TSR's Fiend Folio book. We got our first Burbalang in the May of 2009 in the Monster Manual Dangerous Delve set. For a common mini, its coloring is quite striking. A glossy black on the lower half and wings, merging into a dark blue for the upper body, arms, and face. The bright white eyes, with a distinct pupil, convey the glow-in-the-dark attribute described in the books. It's more upright than Burbalangs are generally portrayed, but if we assume it's rising to attack the PCs, it works. Rating: paint 20, pose 13, playability 14, pizzazz 12, for a total score of 59. "11 years later, we got our second Burbalang in 2020's Fangs and Talons set. Another example, in my opinion, of the Wizards mini being superior to the WizKids one, which is weird because this mini is exactly what a Burbalang is supposed to look like, but it just doesn't do it for me. The dull brown of the mini is correct, as is the hunched over pose it assumes. Perfect example of form over substance, I suppose. Rating Paint 8, Pose 15, Playability 11, Pizzazz 3, for a total score of 37. Chokers are another classic ambush predator, first appearing in 1994's Monstrous Compendium. They are described as small, gray or brown-skinned aberrations with long tentacle-like arms ending in starfish-shaped hands. They delight in attacking creatures from hidden crevices. Their arms can strike out over 10 feet to attack their prey. They are not particularly brave, though. Strong resistance will send them scurrying away. We get our first choker, appropriately, in the Aberrations set of October 2004. The body is color-correct uniform gray, with nice white touches to the teeth and sucker points of the open, outstretched hands. To me, the pose looks more defensive rather than offensive, as if the creature's ambush attack failed and it is in flight or fight mode. Overall rating, Paint 13, Pose 10, Playability 15, Pizzazz 8, for a total of 46. There is actually a subspecies of choker which is native to the Feywild. The Feygrove choker is larger than its subterranean counterpart. This choker, from 2009's Monster Manual Dangerous Delves, is primarily brown in color, so the mini matches the book description, but other than that, the paint job is underwhelming. The pose is, in contrast, much more aggressive than the previous mini, with an outstretched arm as if in mid-attack and an evil visage to match. Score, Paint 5, Pose 14, Playability 15, Pizzazz 7, for a total of 41. 10 years later, we get our final choker mini in 2019's Volos and Mordenkainen's Foes. I gotta say, the further down we go on these choker minis, the less impressive they become. This guy is just not good. It's green, for a start, and not particularly detailed at all. The pose is meh. The only thing in its favor is, from a playability standpoint, it's a fairly recent, common mini, so it's probably easy to get. Score, Paint 3, Pose 5, Playability 12, Pizzazz 1, for a total of 21. The Chul made their first appearance in the 3rd edition Monster Manual. Chuls are large, lobster-like aberrations with an all-consuming hatred of surface-dwelling humanoids. With a yellow-green carapace, the legs and claws of a lobster, and a swarm of paralysis-causing tentacles around the mouth, these guys are nasty combatants. They are smarter than they appear as well, perfectly capable of setting traps and planning ambushes for the unfortunate party that wanders into their territory. We appropriately get our first Chul in 2004's Aberrations set. It's okay, I guess. The coloring is correct. The pose is about what you'd expect, with the claws up in an attack/defense posture. The spiky protrusions on his back are a nice touch, but the tail, described in the books as fan-shaped, really isn't. Overall, I'd give this mini a score of Paint 12, Pose 10, Playability 10, Pizzazz 7, for an overall total of 39. 5 years later, we get our second Chul in 2009's Monster Manual Legendary's Evil. By the way, what's up, WizKids? No Chul minis at all and none on the horizon? This mini is much more impressive than the previous one. Physically larger, with much larger claws, a more defined carapace, and the proper fantail, this is the guy I'm using when my party runs into a Chul. Paint 14, Pose 15, Playability 15, Pizzazz 13, for a total score of 57.
The cloaker is another old-school aberration, making its first appearance in the AD&D Monster Manual 2. Described as highly intelligent and highly territorial, cloakers will basically kill anything that enters their lair. Usually dark blue or black in color, with pale underbellies, some cloakers go as far as having spots on their hide resembling buttons, giving the appearance of an ordinary cloak. Well, until it unfurls and tries to kill you.
We got our first cloaker in the final set released by Wizards of the Coast, 2010's Lords of Madness. Called a cloaker ambusher, it certainly appears to be in the act of ambushing, with its wings unfurled as if about to engulf its prey. The coloring is basically correct, dark blue on top and a lighter, if not really pale, underbelly. I also quite like the face. Red eyes set almost parallel to its toothy maw. Score: Paint 12, Pose 17, Playability 17, Pizzazz 15, for a total score of 63. In March of 2020, WizKids gives us our second cloaker in the Eberron Rising from the Last War set. I definitely prefer this mini over the Wizards one. The paint job is better, with a truly pale underbelly. Also, note the black spots along its back to simulate buttons when the creature is disguising itself as a nondescript cloak. And look at that face. Man, that is just evil. I also like the small arms near its face, which is book correct as some cloakers are known to have these. Score: Paint 25, Pose 22, Playability 20, Pizzazz 24, for a total of 91.
The Destrachan is an evil sadistic aberration that primarily dwells underground. It has no eyes but prominent ears, so relies on sound to track and attack its prey, also making it immune to gaze attacks or blindness. Its main weapon is also sonic in nature, as it can emit a sonic blast from its oval-shaped mouth.
We get our one and only Destrachan mini in 2004's Aberrations set. It's a pretty solid mini, with proper coloring. Note the highlighted spines on its back, and its mouth wide open as if letting loose with its sonic blast attack on a hapless party. As with a lot of older minis, a little TLC was required to get this bad boy standing somewhat straight. Finally, as with all one-off minis from Wizards, its rarity makes playability low, but as with other one-offs, it can be a nice surprise for the PCs. Always a good idea to keep them on their toes. Score: Paint 18, Pose 21, Playability 5, Pizzazz 11, for a total score of 55.
We're going to talk about the next two minis together as one. Both the Dol Grim and Dol Gaunt were created by an extraplanar race called the Daelkyr for their invasion of Eberron. While the Daelkyr were beaten back, their minions remained in Eberron. The Dol Grim are basically two goblins mashed together, with 2 mouths, 4 arms, and a nasty disposition. Dol Gaunts are hobgoblins transformed into emaciated creatures with tendrils replaced in their eyes and a pair of tentacles sprouting from their shoulders. They were used as commanders over the Dolgrims during the war.
We get our first Dolgrim mini in 2005's Death Knell set. The coloring makes it difficult to see, but it's actually a pretty detailed mini, wielding 3 weapons plus a shield. The detailing on its armor is also quite good. Playability is somewhat limited. If you're adventuring in the Eberron setting, you'll probably want a few of these guys for no other reason as possible wandering monster encounters. Overall score: Paint 9, Pose 15, Playability 5, 20th in Eberron, Pizzazz 10, for an overall score of 39 or 54 if you're in an Eberron setting. Our second Dolgrim comes courtesy of, naturally, the Eberron Rising from the Last War set of 2020. This mini's lighter color plus lack of armor allows the details of the mini to shine through. You can really see how 2 goblins were somehow fused into a single creature on this mini. Minor quibble: Dahlgrims is supposed to be small, but this guy is a medium-sized mini. As with our previous Dahlgrim, playability varies depending on your campaign, but all in all, this is a very good mini. Score: Paint 16, Pose 12, Playability 5, 20 if you're an Eberron, Pizzazz 15, for a total score of 48 or 63. We got our first Dolgaunt in, for some reason, 2005's Underdark set. Officially called a Dolgaunt Monk, it's got a pretty good paint job, two-tone with a dark wash to emphasize its musculature. It doesn't quite fit the emaciated description for the creature, though. Someone's been sneaking in workouts on the side. The wash really brings out the emptiness of the eye sockets, which is cool. As with the Dolgrims, playability is based on your campaign setting, so scoring is Paint 17, Pose 11, Playability 5/20, Pizzazz 15, for a total of 48/63. Our second Dolgaunt also comes unsurprisingly from 2020's Eberron Rising from the Last War set. Paint-wise, it is almost an exact match to the previous mini, but the pose is much more accurate to the book description. This guy is skinny. The deep, dark eye sockets are prominent on its face, and the outstretched tongue is a nice touch. Really, you can't go wrong with either mini. Overall score: Playability 17, Pose 14, Playability 5/20, Pizzazz 15, for a total score of 51/66.
Flumps are weird. Basically a translucent floating disc with eye stalks on top and tentacles below, Flumps first appeared in 1980's Fiend Folio. Benevolent denizens of the Underdark, Flumps feed on psionic energy, so they tend to hang out around areas where psionic-using creatures live, such as Aboleths, Illithids, and Gith. They have also been known to warn PCs of such danger, so running into one of these guys can be beneficial.
While I do believe there is a Flumph mini in the Spelljammer set, the only Flumph I have is from 2019's Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage set. Look at this guy. He's adorable. Pearl white with a light blue fading on the tentacles makes it book correct. But you know what would have been cool? Flumps change color based on emotions. How cool would it have been had WizKids made multiple versions of this guy? It's a common mini, so offering pink, blue, green, or red versions would have been a nice treat for players and collectors alike. Something for WizKids to think about should they decide to repeat it. Anyways, scoring on this mini is Paint 13, Pose 13, Playability 18, Pizzazz 21, for a total of 65.
Our next set of minis are from a relatively new creature type. The Foulspawn made their first and so far only appearance in the 4th edition Monster Manual of 2008. A difficult creature to categorize. They are listed as aberrant humanoid in the Monster Manual, so what do you pick? I went with Aberration. Created in the Far Realm and mostly living in the Underdark, they vary widely in size, shape, and capabilities, but all share an all-consuming hatred for creatures from the prime material plane.
We get the Foulspawn Berserker in 2009's Monster Manual, Savage Encounters. As you can guess from the name, these guys are the frontline fighters in any encounter. The mini itself is a great representation of the creature. The blue skin, set against the brown of its tunic and boots, looks good. The pose shows off both its muscular body and the permanent grin and wide open eyes associated with Foulspawn. Playability is solid, and it looks cool, so overall grade is Paint 19, Pose 22, Playability 16, Pizzazz 20, for an overall score of 77. We get our next Foulspawn, the Foulspawn Grew, also in 2009, in the Monster Manual Dangerous Delve set. The Grew are the smallest of the Foulspawn, but make up for their lack of size with formidable mind attacks. The mini is accurate to the book. The skin is color correct with a darkening at the end of the hands to simulate its claws. The pose is also good, with arms extended, either attacking or casting one of its mental attacks. I also like that the tunic is ripped in the back, showing off its wart-covered hide. Overall score, Paint 13, Pose 16, Playability 16, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 60. The Foul Spawn Hulk is also from 2009, this time the Monster Manual Legendary Evils set. I'm sensing a pattern here. This guy is a tank, basically attacking with its bare hands until it or its opponent are dead. The mini reflects this. The blue-black body with light blue veins really shows off its musculature. I mean, who wouldn't want that six-pack? The pose, with it slightly leaning forward, gives the impression of imminent attack. Great mini. Paint 20, Pose 23, Playability 16, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 79. The Foul Spawn Mangler, also from Legendary Evils, is another great mini. The paint is amazing. Great coloring on the skin, armor, cloak, and daggers. The Mangler can dance around an opponent and attack with all 4 daggers at once, and by the pose, this appears to be exactly what this mini is doing. The face, with the standard grin, is, to me, the best of all the Foul Spawn. Finally, notice the details on the breastplate, padrones, and how different the armor is on each leg. Amazing attention to detail for an uncommon mini. Score: Paint 24, Pose 25, Playability 16, Pizzazz 22, for a score of 87. Our final Foul Spawn is the Foul Spawn Seer, also from Legendary Evils. The magic users of the Foul Spawn, he tends to stay on the periphery of the battle while throwing magical attacks at its foes. Another great job, paint-wise. Standard blue-gray skin with a dark wash for highlighting, with a splash of color on its purple tunic and collar. The pose captures him in mid-spell while holding his skull-top staff at the ready, perfectly capturing the role. I haven't run one yet, but I'm thinking how awesome a Foul Spawn encounter would be. A couple berserkers and manglers on the attack, a few Grus in support, plus a Hulk and a Seer to finish. I'm thinking TPK. Score: Paint 18, Pose 18, Playability 16, Pizzazz 18, for a total of 70.
Gibbering Mouthers are first edition aberrations that made their first appearance in the AD&D Monster Manual 2. Basically, a big blob of flesh composed entirely of eyes and mouths, Gibbering Mouthers' favorite attack method is to lie motionless with his eyes and mouths closed and wait for hapless prey to wander near. They then spring upon their prey, mouths latch in on as they attempt to suck the life from it. If successful, a new mouth and pair of eyes appear.
Like many other aberrations, we get our first Gibbering Mouther in the Aberrations set from 2004. Good, solid mini. The light green color really enhances the visibility of the various eyes and mouth. The pose is about all you could expect from a blob of flesh. Could be rising up an attack, could be moving through a dungeon corridor, or could just be having an animated discussion with itself. Score: Paint 14, Pose 12, Playability 16, Pizzazz 15, for a total of 57. "14 years later, our second Gibbering Mouther appears in the 2018 Monster Menagerie 3 set. Larger and darker than the previous Mouther, its reddish-brown hue does a too good job of hiding the mouths and eyes. The pose on this Mouther is decidedly more aggressive, however. The larger, gaping mouths on the central part of the body convey aggressiveness, as does the arcing pseudopod forming as it's preparing to strike. Score: Paint 11, Pose 17, Playability 16, Pizzazz 17, for a total of 61.
The Grell were another early creature from the AD&D world, first appearing in 1980's Fiend Folio, where it even earned a rare full-page illustration. Appearing to be gigantic floating brains, they have powerful beaks and tentacles trailing below that can paralyze with a touch. Grells originated in the Far Realm but have made themselves at home in the Underdark, where their virtual blind sight makes them dangerous predators in the dark.
We got our first Grell Mini as an uncommon from 2005's Death Knell set. Not a lot of color variation on this mini, and the overall dark wash blends the colors even more, with an interesting exception of the bright red tongue. The pose is also cleverly done. By anchoring some of the lower tentacles to the base, they were able to do away with the clear stand while still giving the distinct impression of floating. And with some tentacles extended forward and the beak agape, it's clearly in attack mode. Score: Paint 10, Pose 19, Playability 18, Pizzazz 13, for a total score of 60. "10 years later, WizKids released its first Grell in the Rage of Demons set. In my opinion, this is a clear miss. The coloring is too light for my taste, with the brain-like body too pink, and what's with the orange tentacles? As far as the pose is concerned, it just looks too passive to me. And while the clear mounting post makes it look tall, it's actually shorter than the previous Grell. And to top it off, this mini is a rare. Give me the Wizards mini every day and twice on Sunday. Score: Paint 7, Pose 6, Playability 5, Pizzazz 2, for a score of 20. WizKids redeems itself 6 years later in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight set in December of 2021. While the paint is well done, it's the pose that sets this mini apart. Completely different from the previous two Grells, this one comes at us with its tentacles completely spread out, giving the appearance of equal parts motion and menace. The beak is also somehow more menacing than the previous minis. This guy is ready to rock. Finally, because its tentacles are all akimbo, the clear base basically disappears, giving a clear illusion of flight. Score: Paint 13, Pose 22, Playability 15, Pizzazz 20, for a total score of 70.
Well, boys and girls, that's it for now. I'm trying to keep these videos to around 45 minutes, and I think we've flown past that. We'll be picking this back up in the next video, starting with everybody's favorite brain eaters, the illithids. I know that at some point I'm supposed to ask everyone to like and subscribe, but with only 1 or 2 videos up, that seems a bit premature. I would like to hear your comments though. I know this video is a bit amateurish, but everyone has to start somewhere, so any suggestions on how to improve would be appreciated. Until next time, thanks for watching Eye of the Beholder.